Just to get you going here. Just get you out here.
Good morning. Welcome to this meeting of the House Finance Committee. We're going to have a vote on one bill, and then we're going to have some discussion on three other bills. I'd like to start by having our senior committee legislative assistant call the roll, Lori Smith.
Chairman Samuelson.
Here.
Rep. Abney. Here. Rep. Cepeda. Here. Rep. Fleming.
Vote by designation.
Gallagher.
Here.
Gungauer.
Here.
Harris.
Vote by designation.
Inglis. Here. Krajewski.
Vote by designation.
Rabb.
Vote by designation.
Scott.
Vote by designation.
Vincent.
Vote by designation.
Waxman. Here. Webster. Here. Chairman Greiner.
Here.
DeVenzo.
Vote by designation.
Fritz. Here. Gatos. Here. Jones.
Vote by designation.
Kephart. Here. Kutz.
Vote by designation.
Mako.
Vote by designation.
Rossi.
Vote by designation.
Rinkavich.
Vote by designation.
Stamba.
Here.
And Stender.
Here.
Go.
All members accounted for. I'd like to start with House Bill 1534, sponsored by Representative Hanbidge. We had a hearing on this bill last week. And first, I'd like to ask our committee research analyst, our senior committee research analyst, Shannon Snell, for a description of a technical amendment. The bill first. I'm sorry, House Bill 1534.
Thank you. This bill ensures that all families with eligible child and dependent care expenses are able to claim the Pennsylvania Child and Dependent Care Enhancement Tax Credit. And it does that by first moving the tax credit program from the fiscal code into the tax reform code. And then it creates an alternate options for taxpayer to qualify. Basically, it allows taxpayers that did not receive the federal credit to receive the state credit if the taxpayer instead participated in the Dependent Care Assistance Program under federal law that utilizes a flexible spending account, or FSA, and it would qualify those individuals to receive the same amount of tax credit as those who qualify under the standard pathway under Pennsylvania law.
Thank you. And we did get, we had our hearing, I think it was last Wednesday. Since then, we've received a fiscal analysis from Department of Revenue, and the fiscal impact is in the approximately $10 million, $12 million in year two. They also said that there are 24,800 families that would qualify for the Child and Dependent Care Tax Credit if we adopt this change to allow the folks with the flexible spending accounts to participate. First, I'd like to call up a technical amendment. I have an amendment 1808. I'm sorry, amendment 1007. Ask Shannon Snell to give a description.
This amendment is a technical amendment that would repeal the Pennsylvania Child and Dependent Care Enhancement Credit from the fiscal code, because we're moving it into the tax reform code to make sure there's no duplicative language. That's all it does.
Thank you. This was a suggestion from the lawyers up in LRB after the bill was printed. Take out the reference to the fiscal code because it's now going to be in the tax code. This language was emailed to all of you yesterday, and so you had a copy on your email yesterday. Any discussion on the technical amendment? Are there any votes, negative votes on the technical amendment, Amendment 1007? Amendment passes unanimously. Now moving to discussion on House Bill 1534 as amended. Is there any discussion of House Bill 1534 as amended? I'd like to ask Lori Smith to have a roll call vote.
Chairman Samuelson.
Yes.
Rep. Abney. Sapita Freites? Fleming?
Yes, by designation.
Gallagher?
Yes.
Gungauer?
Yes.
Harris?
Yes, by designation.
Inglis? Krajewski?
Yes, by designation.
Rab?
Yes, by designation.
Scott?
Yes, by designation.
Vincent?
Yes, by designation.
Waxman?
Yes.
Webster? Griner?
No.
DeVanzo?
No by designation.
Fritz? Gatos? Jones?
No by designation.
Kephart? Kutz?
No by designation.
Mako?
No by designation.
Rossi?
No by designation.
Rinkavich?
No by designation.
Stamba? And Stender?
Thank you. And I'll note for the record, Representative Mako is present. The House Bill 1534
When did he come in?
carries by passes the committee as amended by a vote of 14 yes and 12 no. Next, we'd like to move on to a hearing. We have a bill sponsored by Representative Prokopiak. We'd like to have a committee discussion on this legislation. And I'd like to call Representative Prokopiak up to the table. We also have a testifier who's going to join us online. I'll start with Representative Prokopiak. We're talking about House Bill 1503, clarifying the wireless equipment sales and use tax exemption.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, Chair Griner, and good morning to all the Finance Committee members. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this. Can you hear me? We're talking about something that affects our everyday lives. Actually, for some of us, the internet was down this morning and it led to disruption of our lives. Well, here we are talking about a simple clarification to a tax code that is over 20 years old. Can you hear me? Closer? There we go. Okay. Should I? So this bill is really about competitiveness. We're ensuring that we have a healthy and robust telecommunications system that serves all of the people of Pennsylvania, rural, suburban, urban, and allows them to be able to transact business, contact their families through the use of their smartphone, which, according to Pew Research, 90% of Americans currently use. So this is something that affects every Pennsylvanian here. And it's about competitive and ensuring that the investments needed to upgrade and maintain that system are allowed to continue. Every state around us, except for Maryland, currently has this sales tax exemption codified to allow them to continue to make those upgrades. Pennsylvania needs to have that as well. So it's pretty simple. I think it's something that I think we can all agree to. I would like to thank my co-prime sponsors, Representative Friel and Representative DeVanzo, for their work on this. And I think it's a simple change that we can all agree needs to be made. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a testifier online, and it is Scott Mackey, Managing Partner of Leonine Public Affairs. Leonine Public Affairs. I think Scott is online. If you can hear us, go ahead and please present your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Scott Mackey with Leonine Public
Can we-
Affairs. Hearing
We're working on the volume, Scott. Hold on.
too high or too low?
Much better. I can
Okay.
hear you now.
I'm here before you on behalf of AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile, and the Wireless Industry Trade Association in support of this bill. As the sponsor laid out, it's a very simple bill. Pennsylvania has, for a long time, had a sales tax exemption for machinery and equipment that's used to in the networks to provide a mobile telephone service. This bill would simply modernize that provision to specifically include internet access. This is necessary because technology has changed. When this exemption was first put into place, the equipment was really only being used to provide voice services, but now the very same equipment in the networks also provides internet access, and it allows your constituents and everybody in the Commonwealth to use that whole laundry list, alphabet soup of applications that allow people to communicate. A lot of those applications I don't know how to use and understand, but my kids and my grandkids do. This provision would simply eliminate any future uncertainty about the applicability of the existing exemption as the technology changes. It's the same type of equipment. It's really needed to provide certainty for the companies that are investing in those networks in your state. It's critical that companies know when they're investing what the tax treatment is going to be. So this would avoid any potential disputes down the road about what should or should not be taxed that's going into the networks. It would ensure, as the sponsor said, that Pennsylvania continues to have a pro-investment tax policy, as most of the neighboring states do. And it's really critical as the wireless industry has to invest billions of dollars in network upgrades just to keep up with the consumers' demand for technology. The amount of bits going through the wireless networks are growing exponentially. It's doubling every year to 2 years just because of all the new applications and ways that people are using wireless services. I should also note that this legislation is also pro-consumer, because the more investment in networks that occurs in Pennsylvania, the more that high-speed internet is rolled out into more and more areas, it's going to need more competition. It used to be it was just competition between the wireless companies, but now it's really competition between the wireless industry and other providers of internet access. With the 5th generation technology, some consumers are going to be able to use wireless technology for all of their internet. So the more competition there is, the more it's going to drive down prices and give consumers more choices. So this is also really a consumer, pro-consumer bill as well. So in summary, this would continue Pennsylvania's pro-investment tax policy as technology changes. It would be pro-economic growth and pro-consumer. And for that reason, the wireless industry is thankful for the sponsor bringing it forward and supports that bill. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to open it up to any questions from the committee, questions for Scott or questions for Representative Prokopiak. Seeing none, I believe this is a common sense bill. Our sales tax exemption on equipment was set up years ago when it was just wireless plans. Now that data is on everybody's phone, let's make sure our laws are up to date. I have a committee meeting scheduled for tomorrow, a voting committee meeting scheduled for tomorrow at 12 noon. And my intention is to bring this bill up tomorrow. The amendment deadline would be 1 o'clock today. Thank you, Representative Prokopiak. Next, I'd like to move on to 2 bills introduced by Representative Siegel, House Bill 1551 and House Bill 1552. And I'd like to call on Representative Siegel to introduce the bills. And then we'll have testimony from Ryan Froman from the Department of Revenue. We'll start with Representative Siegel.
Thank you, Chairman.
And for the record, Representative DeVanzo is present.
Thank you, Representative and Chairman Samuelson, Chairman Greiner, and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify today. I'm just going to talk briefly about both bills, HB 1551 and HB 1552, both of them requested by the Department of Revenue as it relates to streamlining and modernizing the Board of Revenue's sales tax refund process. So annually, the Board of Revenue will receive about 5,000 to 6,000 sales tax refund petitions, and as it stands now, there are a number of these petitions where a claimant will come forward and submit a refund where there is no basis for the claim or proof of the tax paid, and this can create a tremendous inefficiency in the process. So what HB 1551 seeks to do is just create a basic standard to improve and streamline the submission process for these sales tax refund claims that would require that the claimant submit the basis for the claim and the proof that the tax was in fact actually paid. And in instances where there's over 250 transactions, as it stands now, a lot of applicants are submitting paper copies in large boxes. So as you might imagine, this creates a tremendous inefficiency in the process. And so when a sales tax appeal is submitted with necessary documentation, it takes about 37 days to process that appeal. When that paperwork is not submitted with necessary documentation, it takes roughly 113 days. So I think when we're looking at the process of improving efficiency in our government and making sure that small businesses and folks submitting legitimate claims and going through the process in good faith get the attention and respect they deserve, this is a really good reform to make sure we treat small business owners and folks that are going and trying to do the right thing, and their respective accountants are doing the right thing and playing by the rules, get priority status. And then 1552 creates a means by which the Department of Revenue has a little bit of teeth, which would address some of these frivolous refund claims by creating a system of penalties in instances where there are duplicate claims. So a lot of the times, taxpayers will submit a claim where the claim is already paid and refunded, and so they're gumming up the process once more. Just to give you an example, over the last 3 years, there were about 1.3 million sales tax transactions. 127 of those transactions, which is about $9 million, were duplicate refund claims. So that actually equates to the full-time work of a single employee for 1 year. So what this is basically just allowing us to do is to ensure that the Department of Revenue has some means of actually recouping the cost of staff time associated with some of these frivolous claims and voluminous claims, which is the most I've ever said that word in my life, so that's new to the vocabulary. But anyway, I think these two bills are common sense. They are pro-taxpayer. They are government efficiency, I think, codified in a common sense manner. And I would urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this legislation.
Thank you. I will open it up to questions to Representative Siegel, but first I'd like to also call on Ryan Froman, who is chair of the Board of Appeals in the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue. And also, I'd like to note for the record, Representative Rossi is present.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. That's usually not a problem for me, but we'll make sure that I guess it's going correctly. Thank you, Chairman Samuelson, Chairman Greiner, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this topic today. To introduce myself, I'm Ryan Froman. I'm the chair of the Pennsylvania Board of Appeals. I've been in this with the Board of Appeals for about 19 years. So today I'm going to share some insights from the tax appeals process that I believe will be relevant to your consideration of House Bills 1551 and 1552. So because I'm a data person by nature, you're not getting away from me without a few numbers here to start, but I'll try to keep that piece quick. The tax appeals process starts at the Board of Appeals. We are the first level of appeal. We get about 35,000 tax appeals a year, but we are a no-cost, non-adversarial, fully confidential proceeding. Within those 35,000 appeals, about 10,000 of those are sales tax, and about 5,500 of those 10,000 sales tax appeals are sales tax refund petitions. The next level of appeal is the Board of Finance and Revenue. The Board of Finance and Revenue is also no cost. It does become an adversarial proceeding and a public proceeding, but they are fully independent from the Department of Revenue. When appeals to the Board of Finance and Revenue were just over 3,000, so of those original 35,000 appeals, only about 3,000, only about 8% go to the Board of Finance and Revenue. That's something we're actually fairly proud of. That's a percentage that we've improved. There have been tools that the legislature's given us to try and resolve appeals at the lowest level possible. So only about 8% of appeals go to Board of Finance and Revenue. But of those 3,000, almost half, 1,400, are sales tax appeals, and almost 1,000 of them are sales tax refund appeals. So you're starting to see sales tax refund appeals climb up as a percentage of the appeals as you're going through the appeals process. And then when you get to Commonwealth Court, where there are court costs, it is fully adversarial, very formal rules of procedure. At that point in time last year, Commonwealth Court had about 600 appeals. 381 of those were sales tax appeals, and 357 of them were sales tax refund appeals. So 60% of the appeals going to Commonwealth Court are now sales tax refund appeals. So you can see as you go up the system, you're starting to see more of this clog or this backlog in sales tax refund appeals specifically that doesn't exist in any other tax type, which is why I think largely we're talking about sales tax refunds here a little bit. Couple of things that I'll pass along just in terms of keeping you updated on the appeals process. I'm very proud of my staff and some of the tools that the legislature has given us over the past years. I'm proud to say that over the past 3 years, the Board of Appeals has reduced its average turnaround time 40% for taxpayers. So I'm passing that on as a little pat on the back to my staff and to the legislature for assisting us with valuable pieces of legislation. And one of the tools that you gave us was the ability to compromise with taxpayers. And last year, 2024, in 90% of the situations where a taxpayer requested a compromise, we reached an agreeable compromise. So that's been a very valuable tool for resolving appeals at the lowest level. I'll also make note that we, after 25 years of hard service, we retired our previous online petition center and debuted a new one this spring. We're very excited about that. That's going to provide better service to taxpayers, tax professionals, and also legislators and their staffers who are trying to provide good constituent services. So that being said, coming back to kind of the topics at issue, we're seeing this shift of more and more sales tax refunds sort of clogging up the system as it goes through. And if you look back to the legislation that was passed last year, Act 123 of 2024, one of the sort of, I'll call it the bumper sticker goals of that was to continue to resolve appeals accurately and efficiently at the lowest level possible. And one of the reasons why I'm supportive of House Bill 1551 and 1552 is that they both target that same type of goal of resolving appeals accurately, efficiently at the lowest level possible. 1551 gets at the situations where taxpayers are not either providing, as the representative said, the proverbial dump box of receipts on our desk. And these are situations where, to give an example, a taxpayer feels that they've made mistakes on hundreds and hundreds of sales tax transactions, and they're coming to the Board of Appeals to say, help us fix this. We are simply asking as part of this legislation that instead of dumping a box of receipts on the table and saying, help us fix this, you figure it out, we're saying, can you please provide that to us in a spreadsheet, typically Excel. It's not a very burdensome ask, and it really helps keep these things that should be resolved at the Board of Appeals at the lowest level possible at the Board of Appeals and getting them resolved at that lowest level possible. We actually looked back to see how many people this would impact, and over the past 3 years, this particular provision would impact 1,427 appeals, or less than 500. Of those 5,500 refunds a year, it would impact less than 500 a year. With regard to 1552 and the frivolous refund language, this is the same language that's used at the federal level in the other states, and it really serves as a deterrent to those who would try to utilize or insert fraud or waste into our appeal system. It's providing a deterrent for those who are trying to, I keep using this metaphor of keeping the road clean and clear for those who need to actually, engage in due process, receive due process, and not be held back or stuck in traffic behind those who are frivolously requesting refund appeals. One quick clarification, you said 127 transactions. It's 127,000 duplicate refund transactions that were presented to the Board of Appeals. It's not 100, 127, we'll deal with that, Monday morning in 20 minutes. 127,000, though, takes up, the work of basically a full-time state employee for an entire year. And we're trying to keep the road clear for those employees. To be perfectly honest, this is, I do a lot of speaking at CLEs and with CPAs, with tax attorneys, tax professionals, and this duplicate refund issue is almost something, to a person, they find offensive because it paints the whole industry in a negative light. When people are filing these types of frivolous refund claims, the tax professionals, the attorneys, the CPAs do not want to be associated with those who come in, request a sales tax refund, get that money back, and come back a second time and are asking for that same money again. Or for those who come in who have paid no sales tax whatsoever and are still requesting a refund of sales tax. So those are really the two provisions that we're looking at here. Again, I really think this is good common sense legislation that targets those who want to try and slow down, commit fraud or interject waste into the tax appeals process, and go back to that bumper sticker notion that I talked about resolving appeals accurately and efficiently at the lowest level possible, which is my goal on a day-to-day basis. So with that being said, I hope that gives you a little bit of insight from the Board of Appeals perspective. And as to why I support House Bill 1551, 1552, I welcome any questions.
Thank you. I do want to give an opportunity for the members of the committee to ask questions of Mr. Froman or Representative Siegel. I will start, just a clarification. I know you both said it, but House Bill 1551, that contains the requirement that you just can't just dump a box of receipts. You have to provide an Excel spreadsheet. Pretty straightforward. That's not required by current law. You have, how many times a year do you have somebody bringing in their all their receipts without without organizing or documenting what the request is?
It's not something that we track. We don't count up those bad actors per se, but it's in the hundreds, if not thousands, of appeals a year that come in that. Well, I guess I should say certainly in the hundreds.
Okay.
I feel like when we looked at it, when I looked at that notion of 1551, our best estimates from our analytics team said that it would be applicable to 1,427 appeals over the past 3 years.
And you said one of the goals here is to clear the road for folks who are filing appeals where they're trying to get their refund the first time, not a duplicate appeal, not somebody who's trying to get a refund of something they never had collected or remitted. Is it accurate to say it slows down the processing for folks who are legitimately trying to get their sales tax appeal if we don't tighten this up?
At the Board of Appeals, we try to do a lot of hand-holding with taxpayers, and so we will go back to taxpayers and give them continued opportunities to present what we need and back and forth. And so that's where the representative mentioned that the difference between a taxpayer coming in with the information versus without the information is almost a difference between about a month versus 4 months. That time, that additional 3 months, is the Board of Appeals trying to engage with the taxpayer, trying to work with them, because we don't want to gloss over somebody who just needs some hand-holding to get through the process and to get to an accurate result. But it really does, our desire to provide excellent taxpayer service also is a double-edged sword with these type of taxpayers, because we're trying to provide double-edged taxpayer service to these individuals who are actually just kind of trying to, in some ways, pull a fast one on the Commonwealth.
And I do have a question on 1552. So the first one is providing the Excel spreadsheet, providing the documentation. The second one does allow the department to levy a penalty, 5% if there's an incomplete appeal, 10% if the appeal is found to have no basis at all. I do want to point out the bill, as I'm reading it on page 2, does have some opportunities for the appellant to remedy the situation. I believe we have in there, Representative Siegel put in the bill. Let me call on Representative Siegel if you want to talk about some of those.
Yeah, I think it's important, obviously, that for a claim that's made in good faith, and maybe there's a relatively infinitesimal sum, sorry about that, or it was a good faith error just in the process of submitting for that refund. The claimant has 60 days to rectify that matter, before the penalty is applied. So I think that is fair to smaller applicants who, through the course of submitting that claim, may just kind of make an error or an omission or something in good faith, no malicious intent, obviously not trying to inject any intentional fraud or waste into the system. And so I think that creates a balance between penalizing bad actors, but also allowing good faith submissions to make the necessary improvements or corrections to the refund submission.
Okay.
I would just add that if I were in the position of a tax professional, the only thing that would give me pause about this would be, what about the situation where I accidentally send over the wrong Excel spreadsheet or something like that. I sent over last year's spreadsheet instead of this year's spreadsheet, so it looks like duplicates. Again, there are safeguards built into this to allow for those type of corrections where tax professionals are legitimately, may have made just an error, an oversight, wires got crossed somewhere. This is certainly not targeting those. This is very much trying to address the notion of those taxpayers who are going to be abusive and abusing the system.
Thank you, and I misspoke. I said it was on page 2 of the bill. It's on page 3 that says you can, if you can also prove the claim was, the error was not intentional, there's an exception for that. Good cause, there's an exception for that. There's an exception for that. There's the 60 days. And also, as the bill is written, it only applies to sales tax appeals where the amount is over $5,000. So I just wanted to make those points. I do want to open it up to any member of the committee who has questions about either 1551 or 1552. Representative Kephart.
Yeah, so thank you for being here. So I just have a clarification question, I guess. So currently, I'll have a follow-up to this. So currently, can you submit these in a non-electronic format? So you could turn in the receipts or whatever by paper, I'm assuming, correct?
Sure, there would be an opportunity to do that still for smaller taxpayers under this legislation as well.
So is that what Chairman Samuelson just said about it has to be at least $5,000?
Well, that's with regard to the imposition of the penalty.
Oh, the
If
penalty.
you're talking
Okay,
about the
yeah.
electronic record, it has to be a situation where a taxpayer has effectively said, I made a mistake on a minimum of 250 sales tax transactions, and I'm looking to correct those. And to, give a sense, again, the representative spoke to 1.3 million transactions. It's not uncommon for taxpayers to come in and have 1,000, 2,000, 10,000, 40,000 transactions that they're requesting refunds of. So certainly dealing with the box of receipts in those situations is a little bit burdensome on the board.
Okay, so it's burdensome on the board. So my question then, would it be, I'm assuming there's taxpayers out there that don't have electronic means. Would there be an exception for them if, say, they can't put it together on electronic format or whatever? I mean, I'm sure there's people out there that don't use electronic means. Would there be an exception under this bill for them? Because it says, shall provide all evidence in electronic format in one section. Would there be could there be an exemption for certain people, taxpayers?
I would say that as I'm sure most of you do, we think about tax policy in the context of the rules, with the general rule that we want to have in place for the majority of taxpayers. That being said, I will say at the Board of Appeals, I spoke earlier, we do an awful lot of hand-holding to get people to where they need to be. The way we've gotten up to that number of 92% of appeals being resolved at the first level is by providing excellent service, and finding ways to work with taxpayers who may have different challenges or different limitations. I think the department over the years has tried to, for example, work with the Amish community and work with others that may have. We've been very actively working with certain people who may have disabilities or accessibility problems. And so I think we will actively work with any taxpayer who's trying to resolve a challenge. But I maintain that from a general tax policy standpoint, that the rule is an appropriate and effective rule.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Kephart, for that question. And I'm looking at that page 3, line 11, where the department could waive the fee if the taxpayer demonstrates other good cause for the waiver of the penalty. And I believe the situation that you spoke about where somebody doesn't have on 1552, page 3, line 11. So if somebody does not have Excel, doesn't have access to a computer, they could present that, and perhaps under the good cause exemption in the bill, that situation, I believe, would be covered. If we need to update that language, let us know. Question, Representative Webster?
Yes, for either of our testifiers, and I guess I'm just, I have no experience in this scenario. Could you give us a couple of examples, like I guess if you're a small bait shop in a rural area or an antique, like how do you get 4,000 sales tax reviews that you have to, like sales tax hasn't changed in 40 years.
So when you're looking at sales tax in general, you're talking about primarily some of my sales tax colleagues will be upset at me for saying this, but it's not the most complicated mathematical tax out there. A lot of it is, what's the value of the transaction? Is that transaction taxable or not taxable? And then multiplying 6 or perhaps 7% in some counties against the liability. So what commonly happens when somebody's coming in on a sales tax refund, they may have had an issue with, for example, their tax software, where their tax software was indicating or tracking something as taxable that indeed was not taxable in Pennsylvania. These are big national software companies that sometimes get it wrong as to what's taxable or not taxable in Pennsylvania. And as I'm sure you know, there's lots of exemptions, and the exemptions are discussed frequently each year. So if a taxpayer, if their software, for example, got something wrong, and they say, we sold 2,000 of these widgets and we made them taxable, they may come in and say, that was an error. We want to get that sales tax back, and we're certainly happy to accommodate that. But again, in that common scenario, you're talking about a taxpayer who has software running their business, and it's not usually too big of an ask to get them to say, okay, instead of just printing off, giving us a box full of invoices or giving us nothing in some instances and still demanding the refund, that you put together your list of 1,000, 2,000 transactions that you feel are non-taxable and deserve a refund. Put those in an Excel spreadsheet that we can see and organize and review.
I know I'm digging this way down. So if that were to happen, is then there a burden on a small shop owner to find 4,000 former customers and return the tax to the person who paid it?
What you're talking about there is what we call an assignment of rights issue, and it sort of depends on the situation and what may have gone on. There's a variety of situations that are probably beyond the scope of what I'm prepared to speak about here, but that can be a tricky situation where, in reality, for a lot of these businesses, it's not the sales tax is not their money, so to speak. It's the consumer who paid the tax. That they're the actual taxpayer. So there are situations where businesses may need to obtain an assignment of rights from a customer. There are other times where the business itself may have paid use tax, and they're entitled to. They were the payer of the tax, and so they're entitled to come in for the refund. So there's just a lot of scenarios. I'd be happy to discuss it, but probably not in the context of a short discussion here this morning.
Thank you. A question from Representative Cepeda Freitas.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. And my question is along the lines of Representative Webster. You said, so a business owner will file a refund claim on something that they found that was non-taxable. So they've already paid the taxes, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that they collected it from the taxpayer.
So we're getting in kind of the delineation between sales tax versus use tax. A sales tax is something that they would have collected from the customer.
Right.
Use tax is something where the vendor that they bought something from did not charge them sales tax, but they know they owe that tax, and so they're paying the tax themselves. And so we sort of lump together sales and use tax. So we have SUT. They kind of get blended together, but in reality, they're two different tax types. And again, that's there can be situations where it's effectively the consumer's money, the purchaser's money that the company remitted back, and they've paid back the customer. They can show and demonstrate to us that they've paid back the customer. There are other situations where they've received an assignment of rights, where the customer has turned over the right to that money to the business that's now filing the refund. And sometimes in use tax, where the taxpayer may have actually been the one paying the tax as well.
Can you explain to me the purpose then of the 5% fee and the 10% fee? Because you're charging, right? Because it says he's 5% of the amount of the refund claim if the claim is materially incomplete. So you're charging the business owner an additional penalty or a fee for filing the appeal? I'm a little confused with that one.
Those provisions, and I'll certainly defer to you if you'd like to speak on that. The 5% dealt with incompleteness, whereas the 10% dealt with situations that were deliberately complete, but you're requesting that duplicate refund. Now, so the increase to the 10% is really about those situations where you requested a refund, you got it, and you're coming back the second time. That's the distinction, whereas the 5% is much more on the incomplete situations. I'm not sure if that addresses your question or.
Yeah. Well, and again, on the 5%, it's it's intended to address instances, as we talked about before, where a claimant is perhaps submitting something where they're not submitting the justification for the claim or the underlying reason. So obviously anybody coming forward seeking a refund should be able to point to, first off, that they paid the tax itself, and obviously that they have a legitimate claim as to where they think the error was made. So all we're saying is if you're a business and you're coming forth, or you're the respective claimant, you have to at least do your due diligence to prove to the department that you in fact paid the tax and therefore should be eligible for a refund. And that's where the material incomplete component comes in. But again, obviously the department has wide discretion within the confines of the legislation to waive that fee if if it's a good faith error, maybe something was left out but not intentionally or maliciously attempting to gain a refund that they may have already gotten. So that's where the 5% kicks in. It's intended obviously to force, as good gentleman mentioned, to require folks coming forward to provide all of the requisite information so that the department is not gummed up going back and forth and adding 4 months to the appeals process.
Now is this also applicable? So a business owner, a small business owner will file their sales taxes, pay, and then forgot that they did so, and they do it again.
I think this goes to sort of the good faith exception that Chair Samuelson talked about here. This is not, I would certainly say from my perspective, this is not intended to be any type of a gotcha situation. There are these sort of outs along the way. There's 60 days to try and clarify or fix a situation. And at the end of the day, to be perfectly honest, I view this penalty as deterrent in nature. So if this penalty never gets imposed and we see those duplicate refund claims coming down and things like that, this is doing its job. This is really not something that I'm anxious to rush out and impose on taxpayers. But having no deterrent, there was a taxpayer that was very bold to us and spoke to us about why they filed a duplicate refund claim, and they just said, we wanted to see what we could get. And that was the mindset of some of these taxpayers. Now, that's not the vast majority of taxpayers. That's not the vast majority of certainly tax professionals. Tax professionals find that offensive, again, because it presents a challenge and a bit of a black mark on an industry of very talented and upstanding professionals. But I think that mindset of certain people of let's see what we can get is really what we're trying to get at here from a deterrent standpoint. And right now, there's no deterrent for that individual not to have tried, as he said.
I would just add, I think it's about fairness, right? I know you're a small business owner, and so for the businesses that are doing their due diligence and doing what's right, they're never going to be subject to this, right? And it's unfair to those small business owners who have legitimate issues, in terms of a sales tax they believe they're entitled to a refund to, that they may have to wait in line, they may have to wait longer in that queue process because there are folks who have come forward with a desire to try to perhaps defraud or otherwise get a refund that they're not entitled to or otherwise already have gotten. And so I think for the vast majority of businesses, 99.9% of folks that are coming forward, they have legitimate good faith claims. And I think this protects them from, having to wait to get those refunds that they're owed and entitled while a larger business gums up the process.
Thank you. I got at least 3 more questions. We got 13 minutes. I do want to point our committee members to page 3 of that bill, talking about the 60 days, talking about the good cause exemptions, the time to make corrections, and also the fact that we're only talking about the businesses, the appeals that would be more than $5,000. So a small business seeking an appeal of $100 or a couple thousand, that would not be covered by this bill. I have a question from Representative Waxman, and then Representative Gatos, and then Representative Rossi.
No, I feel like some of what I wanted to ask has kind of been covered, but I have a district that has a lot of retail businesses. We hear a lot from them about how the difficult climate that they're in terms of just the overall economic and business climate, and so just want to be careful that we're keeping those in mind as we're considering this. I would be very interested to see more statistics about the size of the businesses that this is going to apply to. I know some of my colleagues have asked that question already, but it would be interesting to me to get a clear, a bigger picture about who exactly we think are filing these frivolous claims. How much of it is intentional, how much of it is not intentional, and simply just people trying to wear a lot of different hats. So I feel like we've kind of gone over this a little bit with other questions, but just wanted to encourage, that data being made available if we can get it easily.
I think, for better or worse, for those my colleagues certainly know that I'm a pretty data and analytics heavy person, and so I'll be more than happy to assist in probably much more than you want from a data standpoint. The only thing I would comment, and the way that I've thought about this, is that the vast majority of those retail businesses in your district are going to be compliant, and they're going to make mistakes every once in a while. And we don't want, when they're legitimately entitled to a refund, we want them to be able to, as the representative said, be on the track to get that refund back in 37 days, not 113 days. And so we want to get that money back in those retailers' pockets as soon as possible, because it's money owed to them. And so in some ways, I don't want the handful of retailers in your area that may be trying to cause some problems to hold up those refunds for months for the other very compliant or intending to be compliant retailers in your district.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I've got a couple more questions. Also, I forgot to note for the record that Representative Krajewski and Representative Fleming had joined us. I have a question from Representative Gatos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd also like to see that data as well. You said that there was 127,000 duplicates. What is like the average, what is the profile of that? Can you, without giving me specific data, and what is the average request? Because I see on page 3 it says the penalty imposed only applies to those totaling 5,000 or more. So how does that get broken down, that 127,000?
So I think that's an area. First off, I'm going to pause, take a little personal privilege here, and say it's a pleasure to receive a question from a fellow Swickley Academy alum.
Thank you.
Probably doesn't come up very often in these types of hearings, but in terms of the 127,000, this has been an area where tax administration in general has been trying to work towards better analytics in this area. And I will say, since I've been in this role of chair, I'm very much pursuing the direction of analytics. I feel like our team is pushing further and further in this area, and I think in the coming years, for example, coming months, I will have much more to offer. So I certainly welcome a continuing dialogue on how this breaks down, and we can track this and monitor this. In the short term, I'll be happy to get you whatever I can with regard to, with obviously stripping out confidential taxpayer data and things like that. But offline from this meeting, I'd be happy to go back and try and answer whatever questions or provide you with whatever data would be helpful.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Could I just put these two numbers together? I think you said 127,000 sales tax transactions and 5,500 sales tax refund petitions. So if I'm just doing the math, that's about 24 transactions per petition. I assume some are thousands and some are just 1 or 2 or 10.
So I'll try to keep the number. So the 5,500 was roughly how many sales tax refund petitions we get in a year. So I want to try and move these numbers together and keep them in the same category. So if we're looking back at the 3-year window, which is where the 1.3 million and the 127,000 came from. So that would be out of roughly 16,500 appeals involving 1.3 million transactions. 127,000 of those transactions were duplicates. Now, I will also make note that that doesn't, and one area where we're making efforts to try and get better analytics is that's just the duplicate refund claim. That's not the other piece of the legislation where taxpayers filing a refund claim of where they haven't attempted to pay it. And I will say there's just anecdotally, there's one that we received recently, which I didn't really include in the numbers because it's so large that to be blatantly frivolous, but it's somebody who's looking for $100 million back and has never paid a dollar of sales tax. Now, obviously, that gets flagged quickly and disposed of in 5 minutes, so that's not really the substance of what we're getting at here. But again, there's certainly this industry where, or not, I shouldn't say industry, this smaller percentage that we're trying to target. Again, I keep coming back. This should be Department of Transportation hearing, because I keep coming back to keeping this road clear for those taxpayers that really deserve to be getting that money back as soon as possible.
Thank you, Representative Gatos. I have a question from Representative Rossi.
Hi, thank you. My question is on the 60 days. I feel like a lot of people in these situations are unorganized, and they're going to be coming to us and saying, I missed the 60 days. Can they appeal the ruling of the appeal? Like if you say you missed it, because I feel like they're going to come to us and say, I missed this, I didn't have it ready, I can prove it. Is there any leniency or extension or?
I'll certainly let the representative speak to that as well, but I think there are definitely safeguards. This is not designed to say, you know, the clock strikes at midnight on the 60th day and, you know, welcome to your penalty here. This is definitely something that I view as a deterrent in nature, and as I said, I would be perfectly happy if we never impose this penalty on anyone and we just see a decline in the duplicate sales tax refunds occur over time because of that deterrent value of the penalty.
Well, I was concerned about that due to the fine, because if they really come into our office and can prove that they just didn't have it there in 60 days, they're showing it to me, and that's a hard-nosed deadline, that would be a tough sell for me to be a yes. Thank you.
Thank you. And the bill in front of us has 60 days. It has the 5,000. Those are the two thresholds we've chosen. Obviously, we could adopt a different threshold if we would want to offer an amendment.
Well, I just want to note, the language of the bill does say plus any additional time allowed by the department for reasonable cause shown. So I think
60 days plus reasonable time?
Yeah, so I think that allows the department broad discretion to determine, hey, you got it in at 70 days, and we understand you are making a genuine effort to rectify the situation.
And I was going to amend your bill, sorry.
Well, there you go. You don't even have to do it. We'll call it 90.
We have 4 minutes. Any other members have questions? I'd like to offer Representative Siegel the chance for a closing comment.
I just thought these were easy built. No, I'm just kidding. It's grilling me. No. Only that I think I want to add is that I think we are all interested right now in how we can make government more efficient and effective and ultimately serve taxpayers. And I think this legislation codifies that into law in a reasonable and common sense fashion to make sure that we ultimately provide folks that are going through the process in good faith and good intentions priority status, in the sense that they should be able to get their claims heard in a reasonable and timely manner so that they can get money owed to them. And we hold bad faith actors accountable. And you know, as was mentioned, 99% of people, both the taxpayers and the respective, you know, lawyers and CPAs who are representing them, are all doing this with the intention of simply getting money back that they're owed. And for the folks who want to try to take advantage of the system, I think it's important that there's accountability and punishment for the ones that truly are ultimately robbing taxpayers of resources and introducing into the system waste and inefficiency. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all the testimony. Appreciate the committee members for attending. I have these bills also listed on tomorrow's agenda for 12 noon tomorrow for a voting meeting. It's going to be an exciting meeting. We'll have votes scheduled on the Prokopiak bill, the two Siegel bills, and then a hearing. Representative Gogenauer has a discussion, a bill about historic preservation, and Representative Freeman has a bill about historic preservation tax credit for mills and factories. That meeting would start at noon tomorrow at the call of the chair. Thank you, everyone, for attending.